My wife cheated on me with our accountant, and now he's claiming I owe him $250, $0 in loans. He says I took out, but I have no records. He's threatening to seize our house and everything we own in the divorce court. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but here I am, sitting in my living room, staring at the divorce papers and trying to piece together how everything fell apart in just a few weeks. The most shocking part: I caught my wife Lisa cheating on me with our accountant Mark. Yeah, Mark, who I trusted with our finances, who we relied on to keep our money in check. And the worst part, it wasn't just a one-night stand. No, this was an affair that apparently spanned months, maybe longer. It all started with small things. Lisa became more distant, snapping at me over nothing, canceling plans last minute, and hiding her phone like it was a treasure she didn't want anyone to find. I brushed it off at first, thinking she was stressed from work or just tired. But then I noticed her texts changing, more secretive, more flirtatious. She'd get defensive when I asked about her phone, say she was just talking to her friend or dealing with work stuff. Honestly, I didn't want to believe it. I loved her, or so I thought. We had a good life, nice house, decent jobs, 2 kids in school. I thought everything was fine until I saw the messages. It was a random night when I decided to check her phone. I'd never done that before, but something felt off. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her notifications, and bam, there it was. A string of texts between her and Mark, flirtatious, suggestive, talking about meeting up after work, how much they missed each other, and even some explicit stuff. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My hands started to shake and my stomach turned over. How could she do this? How could she betray me like that? I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I stayed quiet, trying to process what I'd just seen. I needed to see if there was more evidence. Over the next few days, I started noticing things I'd ignored before. Her late nights at work, her insistence on keeping her phone closed, and the way she'd suddenly become more interested in her appearance, more makeup, clothes, more flirtatious with her. I even caught her sneaking out of the house late at night once, claiming she'd gone to a friend's house, but I knew better. Then came the day I finally decided to confront her. I was furious, but I kept my cool. I sat her down, told her I knew her secret, showed her the texts I'd found. Her reaction: oh, she flipped out. That I was overreacting, that I was paranoid, that Mark was just a business associate she was helping with taxes, and that I was crazy for thinking she'd cheat on me. She called me jealous, insecure, even accused me of spying on her because I didn't trust her. But I knew the truth. I saw the evidence and I knew she was lying. The emotional hit hard. I felt angry, betrayed, humiliated. How could she do this to me? To our family? I felt like I'd been punched in the chest repeatedly. I loved her and I thought she loved me back. But now, it all felt like a lie. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time I looked at her, I saw the woman I thought I knew, but now I saw a stranger, someone capable of sneaking around, lying, cheating. I was devastated. At the same time, I started thinking about what this meant for us. Was there any way to fix this? Could we salvage what we had? Or was this the end? I was torn. On one hand, I wanted to fight for my marriage, to forgive her, to move past it. On the other, I felt a deep sense of betrayal that made me question everything. I didn't want to be the guy who just gives up, but I also couldn't ignore what I'd discovered. The trust was shattered, and I knew rebuilding it wouldn't be easy or even possible. So I decided I needed some space. I told her I was going to stay with my brother for a few days to think things through. That was the hardest part, knowing that everything was about to change. I didn't know if I was going to fight for us or walk away. The only thing I knew for sure was that I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine anymore. The truth was out and my world was crumbling. After I left the house that night, I felt like I was walking through a fog. My brain was a jumble of anger, sadness, and disbelief. How could Lisa do this? We had a good life, 2 kids, a mortgage, a business we built together. And now all of that was on the line because of her lies and betrayal. I kept replaying that moment I found her texts, the way her words had cut me like a knife. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. My mind kept circling around the same questions. Was I blind? Had I missed all the signs? How long had this been going on? I stayed with my brother Mike for a few days. He's a no-nonsense guy, the kind of person who calls it like he sees it. Sitting in his living room, I poured out everything. How I discovered the affair, the lies she told, the way I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Mike listened quietly, then finally said, "Look, man, you're not crazy. She's been lying to you for months, probably longer. And you've got to ask yourself, what's more important? Fighting for a marriage that's obviously broken, or cutting your losses and moving on?" That hit hard. I'd always believed that marriage was about loyalty, about sticking through the tough times. But what if she'd crossed that line? What if she'd been cheating on me behind my back? I started to realize that my trust was gone, shattered beyond repair. Still, part of me clung to hope. Maybe she'd come clean, admit everything, and we could start over. But deep down, I knew that was wishful thinking. The days that followed were a blur. Lisa called me a few times, crying, begging me to come home, swearing she loved me, saying it was a mistake, that she was sorry. But I could hear the defensiveness in her voice, the way she tried to gaslight me into doubting what I'd seen. She insisted she was just stressed, that Mark was just helping with taxes, that I was overreacting. Yeah, right. The same Mark who had been texting her about meeting up after hours, who had flown her to a conference in Vegas, who was now claiming I owed him $250,000 in loans he said I'd taken out. That's when I started digging into their financial mess. I asked around, checked bank statements, looked for any sign of the supposed loans. Nothing. No records, no signatures, no receipts. It was like they cooked up a story just to screw with me. But Mark was claiming I owed him all this money, money I supposedly borrowed from him to fund some secret project. I knew I hadn't taken out any loans. I kept telling him that, but he kept threatening me, saying he'd take everything I owned, our house, our savings, everything. The more I looked into it, the more I realized Mark wasn't just some innocent accountant caught in a bad situation. He was a manipulator, a liar, and Lisa, she was complicit. They cooked up this scheme together, and now I was caught in the middle. My mind kept racing. How could I protect myself? How could I prove I was innocent? And most of all, how could I get revenge on Lisa for betraying everything we built? I decided I had to fight fire with fire. I started planning my next move. I knew I couldn't just confront her again and hope she'd come clean. That wouldn't work. No. I needed leverage, proof, a way to turn the tables. I began secretly recording her calls, gathering evidence of her lies. I even hired a private investigator to follow her, see if she was sneaking around with Mark or anyone else. It was a dirty game, but I was done playing nice. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her act, crying, begging, pretending to be the victim. She told me she was sorry, that she never meant to hurt me, that she loved me but was just overwhelmed. Yeah, overwhelmed by her affair and her lies. It was infuriating to listen to her spin her web of bullshit. I could see right through her now. She was a master manipulator, a bitch who thought she could get away with everything. All this time, I felt like I was losing my mind. I'd built my entire life around her, and now I was wondering if I even knew who she was. Was she always this manipulative? Did she ever really love me? Or was I just a convenience for her? The betrayal hit me hard, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I realized I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I had to stand up for myself, for my kids, and for what was left of my dignity. So I made a decision. I was going to fight back, not with fists but with evidence. I was going to make sure she paid for what she'd done, and I was going to protect my family from her lies. Whether that meant divorce or some kind of reconciliation, I didn't know yet. But I knew I couldn't just sit around and wait for her to decide my fate. I had to take control of the situation, even if it meant going through hell first. The more I dug into everything, the clearer it became that I was dealing with a level of deception I had never imagined possible. I wasn't just betrayed emotionally. It was like my entire sense of reality was being challenged. I started to realize that Lisa's stories didn't add up, and Mark's claims about the loans, pure garbage. I had no records, no signatures, no proof of any money changing hands, nothing but his word and his threats. But I wasn't about to let him scare me into silence. I hired a private investigator, a guy named Tom, who specializes in financial and infidelity cases. I needed hard evidence, photos, recordings, bank statements to prove Lisa's affair and expose Mark's scam. It was a risky move, but I couldn't just sit back and let these people ruin me. Tom followed Lisa for a week, and what he uncovered was worse than I thought. She was sneaking out late at night, meeting Mark in hotel rooms, and they'd even gone on a weekend trip together. The pictures came back clear, Lisa in bed with Mark, looking like she was completely in her element, betraying everything she told me about being just friends. That was the moment I knew I had to take decisive action. I also started digging into Mark's background. Turns out, he wasn't just some honest accountant caught in a mess. He had a history of shady dealings, lawsuits, and complaints from other clients about missing money. That made me angrier. This guy was a con artist trying to pull a fast one on me, and Lisa was right there helping him. My mind was racing. How do I protect myself legally? How do I deal with this mess in court? I knew I had to get everything on paper, every lie, every betrayal. I wanted to destroy their story and show everyone what kind of people they really were. Meanwhile, Lisa kept playing the victim, crying on the phone, claiming she was lost, that she didn't mean to hurt me. She insisted she loved me, but her actions told a different story. She was cold and calculated, sneaking around, lying, and trying to cover her tracks. I started recording her calls, catching her in little lies, snippets of her saying she made a mistake, that she didn't want to hurt me, but her words were hollow. I knew she was just trying to buy time, trying to spin her way out of this mess. Honestly, I felt numb. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to believe she'd change, but another part knew the truth. She didn't want to change. She wanted to keep her affair going, keep her lies hidden. Then came the day I finally confronted her again, face to face. I sat her down, showed her the photos, the recordings, the bank statements I'd gathered. I told her I knew about her meetings with Mark, about the loans he claimed I owed him, and about the weekend in Vegas. Her reaction: she froze for a second, then started to spin more lies. Said she was just helping Mark out, that the whole affair was a mistake she didn't mean to happen, and that I was overreacting. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I told her I had all the proof I needed, and if she didn't come clean, I was going to take her to court. That's when she lost it. She started screaming, calling me a crazy, jealous husband, saying I was destroying our family, and that I was paranoid. But I saw the fear in her eyes, the panic that she was about to lose everything. She kept insisting she loved me, but her actions betrayed her. I realized then that she'd been planning this for a long time, that her lies were just a shield to hide her real intentions. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, anger at her betrayal, and sadness for what I'd lost. In the aftermath of that confrontation, I decided I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I filed for divorce, knowing I had enough evidence to prove her infidelity and her financial schemes. I also started preparing to fight Mark's bogus claims about the loans. I hired my own lawyer, someone who specialized in these kinds of cases, and began the process of protecting my assets. I knew the divorce court would be messy, especially with Mark threatening to seize everything I owned, but I was determined to fight back. I wasn't going down without a fight. Looking back, I realized that this whole ordeal has changed me. I've gone from being a trusting husband to someone who's learned the hard way that not everyone has good intentions. Lisa's betrayal was a wake-up call, a brutal one. But I also learned that you have to take control of your own life, dig deep, and fight for what's right. I now see that sometimes the people closest to you can hurt you the most, and the only way to survive is to stand firm and face the truth head-on. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I won't let her or Mark destroy me without a fight. The legal process moved fast after I filed for divorce, and I made damn sure I had all my ducks in a row. I handed over the evidence I'd collected, photos of Lisa and Mark, recordings of her lying, bank statements showing she had no record of the loans Mark claimed I took out. My lawyer, Sarah, was sharp, aggressive, and knew exactly how to handle a case like this. She told me from the start that Mark's story about the $250, $0 in loans was a complete fabrication, and she was ready to use everything I had to crush his claims. The first court hearing was a whirlwind. Mark showed up, trying to look confident, but I could see the desperation in his eyes. He was trying to intimidate me with his threats, claiming I owed him money I never borrowed. But Sarah went straight for the jugular, presenting the evidence that proved Mark was a scam artist and Lisa was an accomplice. I watched as the judge listened carefully, flipping through the documents and listening to the recordings. It was satisfying to see Mark squirm under the weight of the truth. My heart pounded, but I kept my composure, knowing this was just the beginning. Meanwhile, Lisa's attitude was a mix of anger and denial. She kept insisting she loved me, that made a mistake, and that she never meant to hurt anyone. Her eyes looked hollow, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. I felt a strange mix of pity and disgust. Pity because she was clearly in over her head, and disgust because she had betrayed our vows so completely. I realized that her manipulating me with tears and false apologies was just part of her game to keep me from seeing the truth. The court hearings dragged on for weeks, and each time I felt more confident. I had undeniable proof that Lisa was cheating, that Mark was lying about the loans, and that their entire scheme was built on deception. Mark, in particular, was trying to spin stories about how I owed him money, but Sarah kept tearing his version apart. She pointed out inconsistencies, called witnesses, and presented the financial records. It was clear Mark's credibility was crumbling. I had never felt so empowered and yet so exhausted at the same time. One of the most shocking moments came when Mark's own financial records were subpoenaed. Turns out, he had a history of forging signatures and falsifying documents. His claims about the loans were completely fabricated. He'd been trying to scare me into paying him, probably hoping I'd cave under pressure. But I wasn't about to let that happen. I had a sinking feeling that Mark's ultimate goal was to seize our house, our savings, everything I'd worked for. That's when I knew I had to be more aggressive. I pushed for a court order to freeze his assets and prevent him from taking anything from my family's account. I also requested an investigation into his financial dealings. The judge granted the order, and I saw the relief in Sarah's eyes. That was a huge win. I knew Mark's threats were just bluffs, and now they were starting to backfire on him. I was finally beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Throughout all this, Lisa's behavior remained unpredictable. Sometimes she'd cry, begging me to forgive her, claiming she was under a lot of stress, that she didn't mean for it to happen. Other times, she'd lash out, calling me controlling and paranoid. I didn't buy any of it. I saw through her lies now. She was trying to manipulate the court, trying to turn me into the bad guy so she could walk away with some kind of settlement. But I was ready. I knew her game, and I was prepared to fight for everything. The emotional toll was heavy. I felt like I was losing my mind sometimes, trying to balance anger, heartbreak, and the desire to move on. But I also felt a sense of clarity. I had uncovered her lies, exposed Mark's scams, and stood my ground in court. It was a long, exhausting process, but I knew I was doing the right thing. I wasn't going to let her or Mark destroy my life. I'd come too far. I was ready to face whatever came next, whether it was a brutal divorce or a fight to keep what was mine. One thing was clear: I wasn't going down without a fight. The court proceedings had become a relentless battle of facts and lies. I spent countless hours with Sarah, preparing every piece of evidence, every detail, making sure nothing was left to chance. Mark's attempt to claim I owed him $250, $0 in loans, was falling apart under the weight of the proof I presented. No signatures, no bank records, just his word and a lot of empty threats. The judge wasn't convinced, and I could see Mark's frustration mounting. That was a small victory, but I knew the fight wasn't over yet. Lisa's demeanor was now colder than ever. She stopped crying, stopped pleading, and started outright lying in court. She insisted she had never cheated, that Mark was just a business acquaintance, and that I was paranoid. I knew better. I had the evidence, the texts, the photos, the recordings, and I made sure they were all presented. Watching her spin her web of lies was almost laughable. She thought she could manipulate her way out of this mess, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I saw through her act. One of the most shocking moments came when the court ordered a forensic audit of Mark's financial dealings. Turns out, he had a long history of fraud, forging signatures, and falsifying documents. His claims about the loans. Completely fabricated. It was a scam, and he'd been trying to scare me into paying him for months. The judge was furious when he saw the evidence, and it was clear Mark's credibility was shot. I felt a strange mixture of vindication and rage. All these months of lies, manipulation, and betrayal, finally it was unraveling. Meanwhile, Lisa's attempt to spin her story was falling apart. She kept insisting she loved me, that she made a mistake, but her words sounded hollow. I could see her trying to cling to some shred of control, but her eyes betrayed her. She knew she was cornered. I also learned from the court filings that she'd been hiding assets, money in offshore accounts, secret accounts she never told me about. It was like peeling an onion. Every layer revealed more lies, more deception. I was determined to get to the bottom of it all. The emotional toll was intense. I felt like I was constantly on edge, fighting not just for my assets but for my sanity. I'd go from furious to numb to hopeful in a matter of minutes. My trust in Lisa was shattered beyond repair, and even though I kept reminding myself that I deserved better, the pain of betrayal was still fresh. I'd loved her for so long, and now I was facing the reality that she'd betrayed me in the worst way. But I also knew that I could let her win. This was about reclaiming my life. The final hearings were approaching, and I knew the outcome would shape my future. I had done everything I could to prove her lies, expose Mark's scams, and protect myself. There was a part of me that still hoped she'd come clean voluntarily, admit everything, and maybe, just maybe, try to rebuild some semblance of trust. But deep down, I knew that was a long shot. She had burned that bridge long ago. All I could do now was prepare for what was next, whether that was a brutal divorce, a fight to keep what's mine, or maybe even starting over from scratch. Looking back, I realized that this whole nightmare has taught me a lot about trust, betrayal, and resilience. I've learned that sometimes the people closest to you can turn out to be the biggest enemies, and that no matter how much you love someone, you have to protect yourself first. I'm not the same man I was a few months ago. I've had to become stronger, smarter, more guarded, but I also know that I'll come out of this, one way or another, better for it. I just hope my story serves as a warning. Trust carefully and don't ignore the signs when they start to appear. Because once the truth comes out, there's no going back. The final court date was a whirlwind. I walked into that courtroom knowing I had done everything I possibly could to prove Lisa's lies and Mark's scams. The judge listened carefully to all the evidence, my recordings, the financial documents, the testimonies, and it was clear that Mark's claims about the loans were nothing but a scam. The judge, after reviewing everything, dismissed Mark's case entirely, ordered him to pay back the money he'd tried to extort from me, and confirmed that Lisa had indeed been unfaithful and complicit in his schemes. Watching her face during the final ruling was a strange mix of relief and emptiness. She looked defeated, her carefully crafted lies crumbling around her. I felt a strange sense of closure, like I'd finally taken back control of my life from people who had tried to ruin me. The judge also awarded me full custody of the kids, which was a relief. My main priority had always been their well-being. The aftermath was brutal but necessary. Lisa moved out of the house and I started the process of rebuilding my life. I filed for divorce, and while it was painful, I knew it was the right decision. I didn't hate her, not anymore, but I couldn't forgive her for what she'd done. Trust was broken beyond repair, and I realized that sometimes love isn't enough to fix what's shattered. In the months that followed, I focused on healing. I cut ties with Mark completely, making sure he couldn't threaten me anymore. I got a new job, started therapy to deal with the emotional scars, and worked tirelessly to rebuild the trust with my kids. It wasn't easy. There were nights when the loneliness hit hard, when I wondered if I'd ever fully recover. But I kept going, knowing I deserved better and that I'd come out stronger on the other side. Looking back, I see this experience as a brutal lesson in resilience. I learned that betrayal cuts deep, but it also reveals who you really are, someone capable of fighting for what's right, even when everything seems lost. I also learned that sometimes you have to rip everything apart to rebuild something better. Trust is fragile, and once broken, it's nearly impossible to fix. So my advice to anyone going through something similar: trust your instincts, gather your evidence, and don't be afraid to fight for your life, your dignity, and your future. Now I'm finally at a place where I can breathe again. The house is quiet, the kids are happy, and I've started dadding again carefully, slowly. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I'm stronger than I thought I was. Betrayal will always sting, but it doesn't have to define you. You can come out of it with your head held high, ready to start fresh. I hope my story serves as a warning and as a testament that even in the darkest moments there's a way forward. And sometimes the only way is through.